Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd and this is my review of episode 7 of season 3 of Strange New Worlds called What is Starfleet? And I think it's probably the worst episode of the entire series so far for lots of reasons which I will have to break down. First of all, it really reminds me of Star Trek Discovery. A lot of the same kind of problems, nothing makes any sense. And to avoid trying to explain it, they just say it's classified. So that's number one. Number two, a whole bunch of tragic backstories of many of the characters. That's the same kind of thing I poked fun at from Discovery, that every single character has some tragic backstory, and that's always the reason they joined Starfleet, was to escape some pain, some tragedy. Like literally every single crew member has a tragic backstory. So that is kind of laughable because they overdo it. If it was a little bit, it's okay. Some of the older Star Trek shows also did that with some of the characters, but it was once in a while. But in these new shows, it's all the time. And that makes it laughable because it's as if Starfleet doesn't recruit normal people. They only recruit people with tragic backstories, and that's always their motivation to join Starfleet, to escape the pain or to have a new family because their entire family died tragically in the past. And so it becomes laughable because they overdo it. And also there are a lot of woke elements in this episode. Only the men are in the kitchen and serve food for the women, and we see a female welder because that's a man's job in reality, and so they always show that a woman is doing the technical manual labor stuff for some reason. So there's all this stuff like that in the background, but also in the very essence of this episode, it's all about this journalist Ortega's brother who is doing a documentary. This whole episode is a documentary about Starfleet, and he keeps comparing the Federation to a colonizer empire and says their starship is a warship. And he asks the crew members in their interviews, does Starfleet send you to kill people? Have you ever killed someone by Starfleet's orders? Like, he's trying to demonize the Federation and Starfleet. And I guess in the very end of the episode, he kind of backpedals and says, oh, actually Starfleet are the good guys after all. But across the documentary, he's trying to do the opposite. And it all doesn't even make sense. That's one of my biggest problem with the whole woke thing. They do it in a way that doesn't make any sense. So what do you mean the Federation is a colonizer? Yes, technically they are colonizing planets, but they only do it with planets that have no intelligent inhabitants, right? So they're sending humans to colonize either barren planets or planets just with vegetation or animals and not any indigenous people. They wouldn't colonize such planets. And so how can he compare it with an empire colonizing other people and as if they're enslaving other people? So it doesn't even make any sense. And that's the whole point of the Prime Directive, that the Federation wouldn't intervene in any places where there are intelligent life forms. They do not want to affect them. They do not want to change the revolution or change their culture or any of that. And yet this episode makes it sound like the opposite, like the Federation is forcing other people to become part of the Federation and all of it. And also in the very end we see those blue Bolians celebrating a birthday and blowing candles on a cake. So isn't that a human tradition? So did Starfleet and the Federation force the Bolians to adopt human traditions? So are the Bolians slaves of Starfleet, just like Mark Twain used to think when he saw a Bolian on the Enterprise D, when he came there from the past? He thought the Bolians are slaves of the Federation. So apparently, according to this show, that's actually the case, because Bolians have been forced to adopt human traditions, and this whole narrative of the episode is that Starfleet is interfering in someone else's war, some two warring planets, and Starfleet had chosen a side and is helping one side over the other, and they never explain why, and each time that question rises, they just say it's classified. That's Starfleet's orders, and we don't know why, and we just have to obey the orders. I'm also reminded of a scene in TNG when Picard specifically told Data that Starfleet doesn't want officers who blindly follow orders, that the officers need to know that what they're doing is right. And so Starfleet and the Federation wouldn't hide the reasons for doing things from their own officers. And yet what we see in this episode is the exact opposite. Everyone are following orders blindly, even when the orders don't make any sense. They're against the Prime Directive. Part of it is not getting involved in other people's wars when they're not part of the Federation. It's not as if the Federation was attacked and they're defending themselves. No, they're getting involved in some other war by non-Federation planets, and they're helping the side which they themselves said used to be on the side of the Klingons in the Klingon War, and yet they're now helping those guys, even though they look like devils. We don't actually get to see the other aliens at all. We are just told that the other aliens are the ones that attacked the devil-looking aliens, and they also show the casualty figures, and they say that the devil-looking aliens lost exactly 9 million people, while the attacking planet, which we never get to see or hear from, we don't get their side of the argument, we don't hear anything by any of those people, we don't get to see them, but they only lost around 100,000 people, and they have a more exact figure. And it's kind of strange how the supposedly good aliens lost exactly 9 million people. If they showed like a sign that it's not an exact figure, that would be okay, but no, they show us the exact figure. And also, why even show us those figures when we don't get to see any of the context? We don't know exactly how people died. Did they use illegal biological weapons to destroy whole cities? Like, I guess so, because the numbers are pretty high, but we don't actually know that. So that figure alone doesn't actually prove anything. We don't actually know who is the right or wrong side in that war, because the casualty figure alone is not enough to make that judgment. Otherwise, if we look at the casualties of the Second World War, the Germans lost way more people than anyone else. So does that mean they were the victims? Does that mean they were the good guys of that war? So no, that's not enough to make that call. So why even show us those casualties as if that's the whole proof we need of which side is bad or not? And so none of it made any sense. We don't even get to see or hear about the other side of the war, who are supposedly the aggressors, and the devil-looking aliens are supposedly the Federation's allies. And whenever anyone questions why are we even getting involved in someone else's war, they just say that's classified, and that's it. That's the usual lazy excuse of the new Trek shows to explain anything inconvenient, anything that doesn't make any sense logically or is a continuity violation. They just say, oh, that's classified, and that explains everything. How come the holodeck existed a century before Scotty even knew about it? Oh, that's classified, it got classified. How come the spore drive didn't exist? Why didn't Starfleet use it to get Voyager back home or in the war against the Dominion? Oh, because it got classified. But why it got classified? That's classified. So there is no actual logical argument, and that's their way to cover it up in a lazy way. So the holodeck got classified, the spore drive got classified, Discover's existence got classified for no reason, just to fit it in with continuity. So this whole essence of the episode doesn't make sense in the context of the Federation's Prime Directive, so it's just a classified reason. Just like in the very end of Discovery, when they had to tie it all with that short trek Calypso, where the Discovery was alone somewhere in a nebula, so they had to somehow explain it, so they said it's a classified mission, we don't know the exact details of how or why it was needed, so it's just a classified reason. So there is a reason, we just are too lazy to actually come up with it, so we're just saying it's classified. So the word classified is said so many times in this episode, and it's just a lazy way to cover up the fact that the very plot doesn't make any sense. Because Starfleet wouldn't get involved in anyone else's war unless it threatens the Federation directly, so Starfleet just decided to violate its own rules. And remember, Picard once said Starfleet doesn't break its own rules when they become inconvenient, something like that. And he told Data that Starfleet wants its own officers to question the orders. And so this episode is the absolute opposite of it. And we never get an explanation. So what was the reason? It's still classified. We don't know. And the fact that it's shown in the context of a documentary which is supposedly viewable to anyone in the galaxy makes it even worse. Like, if they're classifying everything, then why didn't they classify the documentary itself? And there are parts in which the documentary obviously shows a bunch of nasty stuff about Starfleet and then says it's redacted. So he interviews the doctor, he asks him, was he ever sent by Starfleet to kill anyone? And he refuses to answer, and then it shows the details about him and says it's all redacted. So it wants to say how many people he killed, it's redacted. And a bunch of other illegal stuff, it's all redacted. But it is implied in the documentary, so why isn't the documentary itself classified? Also, the way it's all filmed is also laughable because it looks like a documentary made today. It doesn't look like anything futuristic. And the cameras themselves, we've seen them in previous episode when they've been setting it up. They showed us that he has these flying drones with cameras. And yet, when we see it in this episode, it's all shaky cam and it's all badly filmed, as if it's filmed manually by someone drunk, that it's all moving all over the place. And whenever something happens, some action scene, there are interferences, and it looks like really bad technology, worse than today. Like, a camera is shaking, and so it has a bunch of interferences, and they couldn't fix it in post, they couldn't fix it with AI and all of it. Like, we can do it today, we can get better footage today with today's drones and today's stabilizing cameras and all of it, so why does it all look so terrible? And at some parts it looks like he was sneaking behind people's backs to film them and record them from around the corner without them knowing. So they're having a classified conversation with someone in Starfleet, and then he's filming it from around the corner so they wouldn't know they're being filmed and all of it. And also he surprises people with questions about stuff they didn't know to catch their reactions. And so he's interviewing Uhura, who talks all about losing her whole family before joining Starfleet. And then he informs her live on camera that her best friend from the academy, her roommate, her bestie, died in a Gorn attack, and she didn't know that before. So he did it by surprise to catch it on camera, to catch her emotions. Isn't that kind of nasty to not prepare her just to catch it on video for his documentary? So all kinds of nasty stuff like that. And so the way everything is filmed with a shaky cam, with weird angles, it doesn't even make any sense because it's filmed by these advanced drones supposedly. So don't they have stabilizer cameras in the future, which we have today? And also they have holographic technology, right? They show they have a holodeck just as good as in TNG. So you're telling me they cannot film anything with some holographic scanner and then it will look perfect after editing? So why is everything filmed so badly with shaky cam and all of it? So nothing about it makes any sense. Why does it all look like a documentary made today? And also Spock is trashing his own people across this documentary. He constantly talks about how the Vulcans are racist against humans and how much he was shunned and almost banished by the Vulcan society. And at one time, some Vulcan friend he had as a kid on Vulcan was told by his parents not to be friends with Spock, and then he ran off to the desert. And then he said that his father found him in a cave cutting himself with a knife because he was trying to cut away his human half, something like that. So would he really talk about all of it in front of a camera for a documentary that will be viewable across the galaxy? Would he really trash his homeworld on camera like this? Even if the stories make any sense, Vulcans are also supposed to be enlightened society in the future, even though we often had glimpses of the evil Vulcan side in many shows, even in the older ones, but for the most part, I always assumed the Vulcans are an enlightened people, that only a minority of them might be racist against humans and stuff like that. And yet, according to all these new shows, most of the Vulcans are like that because we constantly hear such stories. And so all the Vulcans hated Spock and were racist against him, and now he openly talks about it in a documentary that will be viewable for the whole galaxy. So I cannot buy for a second that the real Spock, the classic Spock, would ever do such a thing, because he was a very private person that wouldn't even tell his closest friends about his personal life, and yet now he's talking about it in front of the whole galaxy in a documentary. Give me a break. That was absolutely ridiculous. And then they even show him holding hands with La'an and meditating together with her, so they're being intimate on camera. That's the last thing a Vulcan would do if it was the real Vulcans. And so nothing in this episode made any sense. And all these tragic backstories by every single character. Pike says how he had to euthanize his own horse after it got injured and he had to kill it so it wouldn't suffer. And Ortega says that her mother was dying from some illness and she couldn't face it, and that's why she ran off to join Starfleet. So she abandoned her own dying mother and wasn't there for her and joined Starfleet instead. And so all these characters joined Starfleet to escape some tragedy and some pain and to abandon their loved ones. We had something like that in a previous episode as well, when Ensign LaForgery was channeling the spirit of someone's dead mother. One of the guards was guarding his cell, and he also talked about how that guard abandoned his dying mother to go join Starfleet. So literally every single member of Starfleet is some kind of victim of a tragedy, and that's why he joined Starfleet. They even did that in Picard, that the reason Picard ran off to the stars was to escape the pain of his dead mother who committed suicide and all of it. So it's literally every single person in New Trek joined Starfleet to escape some pain, and they all abandoned their dying and suffering loved ones and they leave them to die alone, and they're supposed to be good people. I don't think so, and so I feel like personally insulted by this episode with this notion that it's a good thing to abandon your dying, suffering family members to go off, join Starfleet. And if that person at least would say, oh, that was such a bad decision, I'm a horrible person, if they have some kind of regret, then that would be okay, but they don't. They seem to be perfectly okay with that decision. And this whole plot that the Federation is getting involved in someone else's war and helping out one planet to defeat another, and they're ordered to deliver a creature that is able to fly through space to that planet so that it will help them in their war. And the creature is intelligent and emotional and it's been basically enslaved by that planet, and Starfleet is apparently okay with it, at least at first, and they've been ordered to deliver that creature to that other planet. And only in the very end of the episode they decide actually it's immoral, so let's help that creature commit suicide. That's when Pike told that story that he had to euthanize his own horse, and so they helped that creature fly into the sun to commit suicide because the creature felt so bad about being used as a weapon, and so the Enterprise decided to help it destroy itself by flying into a star, which also reminds me of that TNG episode Tin Man, which also had a space creature that was waiting next to a star that was about to go supernova to commit suicide. And also with so many space creatures appearing in all these prequels, in Discovery we had those space whales everywhere. It makes it ridiculous how come in TNG they were always so surprised and amazed to find out there's a space-faring creature that lives by itself in space. Why were they so amazed and surprised by that when Starfleet already encountered so many such creatures in the past? And we cannot say that this one was classified because apparently this is a documentary for the whole galaxy, so it is in the historical records, and those space whales from Discovery were known by everyone, people were even eating them on some planets and so on. So how come in TNG they were always so amazed and surprised to find out, oh, it's a creature that lives completely in space? How amazing is that? How surprising is that? I guess maybe it's rare for such creatures, but according to all these prequels, there are a whole bunch of them. So why was anyone so surprised in TNG and Deep Space Nine whenever they saw such a thing? And all the woke elements of the maker of the documentary being so brave and heroic to ask difficult questions, comparing the Federation to a colonizing empire, and says that starships are actually warships full of weapons. And Uhura even praises him at some point, oh, you're so brave to ask all these questions and all of it. So, and I do think it's okay to ask questions, but the questions are ridiculous. Like, who is this documentary even for? The title of it is, What is Starfleet? Are you telling me humans on Earth don't know anything about it? It's the first documentary ever about this organization. Who is this even for? Like, nothing makes any sense. So if it's all a classified mission, why are they allowing the documentary to happen? And then they only classify little bits of it and they never explain till the end. So why exactly was Starfleet helping that planet who were abusing animals? And did Pike actually violate orders in the end, or did Starfleet itself change their orders? They didn't actually explain it. When suddenly they decided to protect that creature and they said suddenly Starfleet declares that planet of that creature under its own protection. So isn't that kind of imperialistic? They are supposedly having a moral reason to do it, but it's still a violation of the Prime Directive. It's not their planet. So who are they to suddenly declare, oh, that planet is now under our protection. You are no longer allowed to use the creatures on that planet for your war effort and so on. So did Starfleet not know anything about that creature before they sent the Enterprise there to pick it up and deliver it as a bioweapon to one side over the other? So did they not do their research before making that decision? And that's one of the problems. That's one of the reasons the Prime Directive is a good idea. Why should you involve in other people's conflicts when you don't really know the full details of it? That is a very easy way to accidentally pick the wrong side. There was a very good episode of Stargate SG-1 about that very issue when they arrived on some planet and they thought they're helping out the good guys, and in the very end they discovered they actually were helping the bad guys, the ones who are like Nazis. And so they didn't do their research. They didn't know the full details. So that's one of the reasons the Prime Directive is a good idea, that you don't want to accidentally pick the wrong side. And even if a side is good for sure, maybe it's still none of your business to getting involved, because Starfleet is not the galaxy's policeman. It's not their job to go around telling other people what is moral or not, or what they should or shouldn't do. So unless it is something that is directly threatening the Federation itself, they shouldn't be involving in any war, even if it's justified. And yet this episode dismisses all of it. And they've been trash talking the Prime Directive in New Trek for the past several years in all the recent Star Trek shows, and now they're just completely dismissing it as if it doesn't exist. And so whenever someone questions, why are we getting involved in a war? It's classified. There is a reason, but it's classified. You have to blindly follow orders. And then in the very end, they don't. In the very end, they had a change of heart. So did Starfleet orders change, or did they violate them? They don't even explain it. So the very setup of this episode of its all being a documentary is kind of a clever way to try to just show us little bits and pieces without showing us the full story, and try to make some kind of point. So what was even the point of the episode? So is it a good idea or not a good idea to get involved in that war? Because we don't even know anything about it. And they show us these figures as if that alone is supposed to prove something. So one planet lost only 100,000 people, the other one lost exactly 9 million people. So that's kind of a round number, which is kind of suspicious. And that alone is supposed to prove they're the good guys because they lost more people. that is really simplistic. At least they did have that twist that the planet they're helping is actually kind of evil since they're enslaving these intelligent space creatures and trying to use them as a weapon. So in the very end, Starfleet turned on them and stole their planet basically. So the Federation is actually an empire based on what we see. They're getting involved in other people's wars, they're taking over planets, and so even though in the very end of the episode they suddenly say, oh no, actually Starfleet are the good guys, but the context seems to be the other way around, so nothing makes any sense. That's my main problem with the whole woke thing. It's not even the messages, because they don't know themselves what is the message, what is the moral lesson they're supposed to be teaching, that abusing animals is wrong. Like we wouldn't know that already. That's really simplistic, really kind of basic stuff. And what would have actually been interesting is to get into the actual politics of the situation, to actually know what's really going on. And maybe it's a shady, not black and white situation, and so that would be a moral dilemma. Should we interfere? Shouldn't we interfere? What should we do in that situation? That would actually be interesting, but they never delve into any difficult or complicated topics in the new Trek shows, and that's one of my problems with it. It's all very simplistic, and it's as if they're trying to make it look complicated, but it's really not. And deliberately leave it all vague and unclear so that they wouldn't have to actually write it. They don't actually have to write a difficult, complicated situation, and so they just say this, there is one, but we don't tell you the details because it's all classified. So that is very lazy, I think. And so in the very end, Starfleet basically betrayed their own allies and suddenly turned against those devil-looking aliens, and then those aliens start threatening them, and then Pike says, if you threaten one of us, you threaten all of us. And so he basically threatens war on those aliens that they were helping, and so that line is so cringe. It reminds me of that line from Spider-Man when some New Yorker threw a can at the Green Goblin because he was attacking Spider-Man, and he told him, if you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. And so that was just as cringy as that. So Pike says, you won't mess with us, because if you mess with someone from the Federation, you mess with the whole Federation. So now they're dragging the entire Federation into war. You know, that's one of the reasons they shouldn't have gotten involved in the first place. And all the personal stories were also kind of silly, the way he tries to get them to admit that they either violated orders or falsified logs or they're doing something immoral and they're being sent by Starfleet to kill people, and they all try to wiggle their way out of those questions. And I guess it is similar to how journalists try to interview people in real life, but again, this is not set today. Why is this whole documentary feels like it's been filmed today? Wouldn't the style of TV in the future be slightly different than today? That reminds me also of that scene in Picard when some journalist was interviewing Picard and trying to gaslight him, trying to admit bad things about the Federation and Starfleet, and he fell for it, and then it was viewed in the whole galaxy, and then people in Starfleet were angry about him for why did you trash talk Starfleet. And here we have a similar situation of Spock trash talking his Vulcan people for being racist against the rest of the humans, and so all kinds of stuff like that. The only parts I kind of liked were the ones with La'an. I don't know if it's because the actress is so good or that it fits her characters, but she's the only one that kind of, it made her feel like a real person. And even she had dialogue which kind of darkens Starfleet. She says, sometimes we have to shoot first at an enemy and stuff like that. But isn't that also against the very ideals of the Federation and Starfleet, that they never fire first, they never are the ones to start the war? And yet all this dialogue and across this whole episode contradicts all of it. So it's as if this documentary was made specifically to criticize and demonize Starfleet, and it picks a mission in which Starfleet violates apparently its core beliefs, like the Prime Directive, which is not even mentioned by name even once, and so it doesn't make any sense. You know, in the comedy episodes, at least I could excuse it by saying, oh, it's for the sake of a comedy. And yet here it wasn't a comedy episode, it was supposed to be totally serious, and yet it has all this nonsense which doesn't make any sense, and so it's unforgivable, I think, and so it's one of the absolute worst episodes of all of New Trek, in my opinion. It also had a lot of little dumb moments which didn't make any sense, like for example Spock tried to mind meld with that creature and it fried his brain and he's in a coma, and then Uhura says, I will continue trying to communicate with it, they are using some kind of device to link with it or whatever, and so she says, I will try to do it, and then Pike says, I will not risk another crew member, and she says, you won't have to, I volunteer. And then they show us that she's doing it. So wait a second, he told her he wouldn't allow anyone else to risk their life, but then she says, but you're not doing it, I'm doing it, I'm volunteering. And so, once again, there is no chain of command. Pike has no control over his crew members, they're all doing whatever they want. So because she's volunteering, that suddenly means he cannot order her not to do it, so nothing makes any sense. So Pike has no authority over his own crew member. He's basically the cook. In the end of the episode, we see once again that he's serving food for his female crew members. Only the men are serving all the food, and the women are just enjoying it. So they're punishing the men by putting them in the kitchen. So a lot of stuff like that. And they think they have an agenda, but it's all done in such a stupid way, they're not even promoting any actual ideas, except I guess it's not okay to enslave an intelligent animal. So that's the only kind of message they actually have. And so I think it was the absolute worst episode of the entire show so far. That's my opinion. Let me know what you think, and we can discuss it in the comments below. And I will see you all next time. Bye bye.